Is there such a thing as window tint that's too dark? I'm Kyle. This is 5% all around with 15 on the windshield. And let's talk about it. When I was younger and dumber, I would say no, there isn't such a thing as window tint that's too dark. I've run a lot of window tint setups. If you're curious about my background, I used to work at a tint shop. I didn't used to tint the windows. I used to wrap cars in PPF. But I have seen enough cars and been in enough cars with different window tints to get an idea of what is and isn't okay. Or so I thought. Because when I had the WRX, I was running 5% all around with 20 on the windshield. And I thought it was perfect. It was dark enough where nobody could see in. I could see out perfectly because I was using high quality tint. The only thing I really had to worry about was cops. But in any other scenario, I would say 5% with 20 on the windshield is great. There's no such thing as too dark. Well, maybe 5% on the windshield is too dark. But at that point, why would you even bother driving with your eyes open? I'm talking about practical tint setups. Can you have a tint setup that's really dark but balances privacy and clarity really well? With the BRZ, I decided to run 5% all around with 15 on the windshield. You see, I went to the window tinters, and Lewis, who was a longtime friend of mine, and actually the first person to legitimately tint my WRX, recommended I just go 5 with 20. But me, wanting to push the limits of what's possible within the window tint game, I said, let's throw 15 on the windshield, and we'll see how that goes. Now, being from New York City and spending all of my time in the city or in Long Island, all of my driving hours are spent in places that are relatively well lit. And because of that, darker tint didn't really bother me. There's enough ambient light to go around where I can drive around fine at night. But now that I've grown up a bit and I've spent a bit more time out in the suburbs of New Jersey or, driving through Pennsylvania, I've come to realize that having really, really dark tint raises some questions, such as, who put that curb there? Where did that trash can come from? Is that a family? Yes, it was a family. We have to go. Recently, I took a trip with my girlfriend to New Jersey for a summer barbecue, and we left there probably at 9 o'clock. This isn't like Jersey City, New Jersey. This is like almost 2 hours south into Jersey. This is the suburbs. And we get in the car to leave, and I turn on the car and I turn on the headlights, and I realize that I'm nervous. Why am I nervous? Because I couldn't see anything. This is one of those neighborhoods where there's not too many street lights, there's the occasional sign, there's no painted curbs or anything, there's trees everywhere, and most of the houses, people are asleep early, or, people aren't home, they're dark. With these windows, with 5% all around and 15 on the windshield, everything looked pitch black, even with my headlights on. This is probably the first time I would say I experienced something like this, where it was just, we weren't in the city anymore, And that got me thinking about this video. That had me questioning, hey, are my tints too dark? In a situation where you're driving through a small town where there's not a lot of lights, this kind of setup can get just a little bit sketchy. But with that being said, let's talk about this tint and its pros and some of its cons. To do that, let's start with the outside. Now that I have all the lighting adjusted for outside, as you can see, pretty dark. You can't see into the car from, I would say, 90% of the angles, 99% of the angles that you're looking at. You can still see the registration. You can see the license plate that's on the dashboard. But other than that, you can't, even if you look around, you can't really see into the car because the curvature of the windshield, the darkness of the tint, and the brightness of the sky. I mean, it's an overcast day. But the brightness of the sky turns the windshield into a mirror from the outside, That difference in lighting between the inside and the outside really obscures the driver and the passenger and anything you have inside, and that is what I wanted. I apologize if the car looks dirty. It started raining on the way here, and then it stopped, because we've been having some bipolar weather this summer. Personally, I think 5% with 15 on the windshield looks insanely good. It's so sleek. I mean, come on. Makes the car look like a fighter jet. I mean, I won't take it that far, but it looks way, way sleeker than just your fishbowl stock look. Not to mention that as a videographer and photographer, sometimes I travel around with a lot of equipment, and the best thing to do to keep your stuff from getting stolen is 1, lock your car, 2, take your stuff with you, Or 3, if, say, those aren't available, you're eating at a restaurant or you're just taking a rest stop. The best thing to avoid them from being stolen is to stop people from seeing inside the car. And I think it's pretty safe to say that you can't see inside the car. Here's the view from the back. Still can't see no matter what angle you try to look at. Now, like I said, it is an overcast day here in New York City. I guess it's a good representation of, you know, really bright brights, such as over there, really bright, and more gray, which is back there. You kind of get a good idea of how this tint looks on the outside. Now, I do have to say my favorite thing about running dark tint is the look of the car. This is a completely stock BRZ. I didn't even lower this thing yet. Obviously from the monster truck wheel gap. Just look at it. Just, if I get down right here, that's a good looking car. What the tint does is makes the car look slimmer by reducing or making the windows look smaller, kind of streamlining the whole thing. And now let's go inside. So now that we're inside, what I'm gonna try to do is I'm gonna try to adjust the brightness, the white balance of my camera to kind of match what I see in person. So here we go. That's pretty good. I would say that is an accurate representation. So as you can see, 15 on the windshield. Almost looks like there's no tint there. Kind of just looks cloudy. It just makes cloudy days look cloudier. But you can see fine. And on the side, also really good. Also really good. What I could even do is I can throw this puppy into gear and let's just cruise around this parking lot and try to see if there's any details that we can't see anymore, you know? Everything looks fine. I can see the curb. I can see all the lines on the road. Reading license plates isn't a problem. You know, we're kind of just cruising. Overall, no complaints. I can see every detail that I really need to see during the day. I can see. You want to know the difference? This is 15 again on the windshield, 5 on the side. Roll that down. Now, some of you guys might ask, is this the ideal tint setup? And my honest answer is no. You reach a certain darkness where it starts to look the same from the outside. I would say that level is 20% all around with at least 20 on the windshield. It's gonna look the same as if you had 5. The difference is with 20 all around and 20 on the windshield or 30 on the windshield, there will be more scenarios where you'll be able to see into the car. And that's not really something that I wanted to risk. In my opinion, the ideal tint setup for something like a BRZ or a WRX or, you know, a sedan or a coupe, I would say is 5% all around with 30 on the windshield. I think at that level of darkness, you are gonna reach the ideal balance of privacy, and at the same time, you'll still be able to see out in 90% of the situations you find yourself in. It'll still get dicey, you know, at night in the rain, but driving at night in the rain is somewhat always dicey. Is this the ideal tint setup? No. Would I go this dark again? No. Now, in terms of windshield tint, I'm gonna say it, 15 is too dark. 20% is manageable. 30%, depending on the car, is probably more than enough. Now, the reason I gave kind of different answers for each level is that every car is different. Now, the BRZ, it's a small car, small windows, pretty big windshield, but the windshield is at a pretty severe angle. And what that means is when the light hits it, if you have tint, the windshield turns into a mirror faster because the light is reflecting. You need less tint for the light to fully reflect, if that makes sense. If you were in, say, something like a G-Wagon or a Jeep or a truck, something like 50 to 35% on the windshield is not going to bounce the light off at a rate where you won't be able to see anything through it. I'm trying to explain that in a non-scientific way. If you're here, right, and the windshield is here and it's straight up, you can see through it because the object you're looking at is not obstructed by any bouncing light. You can see right through it. And at that point, you would need to have darker tint to obscure someone's view. You know, if they're trying to look at you straight on, you're gonna need more and more tint. So that's when you get into like the 20% and below category. As the windshield gets more angled, when someone is looking at it straight on, the windshield is gonna start reflecting more of the sunlight or, you know, the ambient environment from the outside versus what's behind the tint. So with the BRZ being like this, you don't need as much tint to not see through it. I would say with the BRZ, you could probably get away with 30% and you will have the same blackout effect. We're now getting into direct sunlight and you see how I get a little bit blown out here? So now my back is towards the sun. And you see how it looks like there's no tint on the windows at all? That's kind of what it feels like when you're driving in bright sunlight. The difference comes when I roll down this window, for example. Now, the benefit of this is once you get to this dark of window tint, the heat rejection is incredible. Most brands offer two kinds of films. They have like the base film that's just window tint. Most of them are color stable. They won't fade or turn purple. And that's just your run-of-the-mill window tint. The upper echelon, the prime film, is like nano ceramic. It has a different kind of technology behind it where it rejects more heat. So that way when you're driving, you know, you're not really feeling the heat hitting your arm. At this level of darkness, at 5% with 15 on the windshield, you aren't feeling that heat. That's just the way it goes. There's just enough light and UV being reflected and rejected that you're pretty much getting the same effect as paying for the premium film. The benefit of the premium film is if you want to go lighter, if you don't want to go 5% on the side, if you don't want to go 15 on the windshield, if you don't want to go 20 on the windshield, that prime film, that premium film, will reject the heat. But if you plan on going this dark, you kind of don't have to pay for that level. Although I will say that this is the heat rejection film courtesy of the window tinters. Shout out to Lewis, shout out to the guys who tinted my car. So let's take a step outside and we can see what this tint looks like in the bright, bright sunny day. Also, how do you guys feel about my new audio? The shotgun mic was being a bit annoying and it was kind of limiting my ability to shoot in-car footage and whatnot. So I decided to bite the bullet and get a wireless lav mic. So let me know how you like the audio sound, because I think it sounds pretty good. I hope it does. This is gonna be jarring. Here we go. So you can see the sun came out. It is much, much brighter now. And there is Bay of the BRZ. You see how much of a mirror the front windshield becomes? The tint is refracting the light at such a rate where you can't see into the car. Now, because it is so bright, I can kind of see, I don't know if you can see, but I can kind of see the steering wheel because there's light reflecting off of the leather on the steering wheel and it's bouncing out, and now I can see that it's there. I can see the license plate clearer because it's a reflective plate and the light is hitting it and bouncing back out of the windshield. And same thing with the registration. Anything bright inside the car, you're gonna start to see. The only way to really avoid that is if you had mirror tint. But knowing what I know now, it probably wouldn't have made a difference between 15% and 20% and 30%. When the light gets in and it reflects off of something bright or lightly colored, that light is gonna bounce back out and you're gonna be able to perceive it. Now, this is just the tint during the day. From the outside, it looks great. And from the inside, on a bright day like this, it looks like there's almost no tint. But the real test of whether or not there's tint that's too dark is to test the tint at nighttime. It's about 9:30 at night, and this is one of the better lit streets, as you can see. Plenty of street lights. It's like an industrial park kind of deal. There's Bay of the BRZ behind me. Doing a quick walk around. From the outside, as you can see the windshield, you are not seeing into that at all. No matter what angle, you can still see the license plate. See, so you can still see the license plate, but you really can't see anything else inside the car. That is 15 on the windshield. As far as that light and that light right above us, you're not seeing into the car. Directly to the side of the car, you're not seeing anything either. And we are now on the passenger side, and as you can see, it's not only dark because it's nighttime, but you also cannot see through. Can't see through the side windows. You can't even see the lights of the bus behind you. However, the only time, like I mentioned earlier, that you'll see anything is when something is brighter on the inside versus the outside. So as we walk around, you're gonna see the gauges, and that's still barely at this point. But if I open my door, see the gauges and the infotainment screen. Now on the camera, it doesn't capture it all too well, but to the naked eye, you can see pretty clearly everything on someone's gauge cluster and infotainment screen. Walking around to the back, I love the rear end of this car, man, especially after putting that F1 light. Oh, from directly behind, even with 5% on the rear and 15 on the windshield, because the infotainment screen is illuminated and because the gauges are illuminated, you're gonna see them from the outside of the car. Now I know what you guys are really wondering about is what this tint looks like from the inside. So there's the outside world. This, funnily enough, this is the brightest setting that the camera has. This is 15% on the windshield, 5% on the side. As you can see, This is what I mean by this combination can get a little bit dicey. If I turn my lights on, get pretty good visibility. The sides, man. There's your basis of a comparison. Huh? How's that? All right, so to make this a legit tint review, let's go for a night drive. It's not the brightest road, but it's lit enough. You can see the street lights every few hundred feet. You can see the traffic lights, and you can see that my headlights are doing a great job illuminating the road. Now to the side, it can look pretty dark on camera, and I can tell you that in person, yeah, it's pretty dark. I can still see curbs. I can still see the white painted lines. But in terms of parallel parking, I definitely would roll my windows down just to make sure I don't curb my wheels. This is driving with 15% on the windshield. I can still see oncoming cars, and a lot of this I kind of have to describe what I'm seeing with my naked eye versus the camera, because the camera can only adjust the settings so bright. But I feel like this is a fairly decent representation. Maybe slightly darker than what I'm seeing in person, but I can still see, like, that car is all black. I can still make out his silhouette. I can still read his license plate. I can still read oncoming license plates. I can see parked cars fine. It's not really an issue. But the benefit of having such dark tint all around is guys like this who have their high beams on for no reason don't really bother me as much. As underpowered as the FA24 is, you can't deny how good it sounds. Put it in second, a little bit of a... Try to get some juicy downshifts though. What a downshift, so good. We're coming into this parking lot. Bright, empty. All right, so I'm gonna step out here real quick. Oh, see, nice and lit. This is probably the brightest spot in my neighborhood right now. There's Bay of the BRZ in all her glory. This lighting is actually pretty fantastic. 5% on the sides, 15 on the windshield. You are not seeing into this car. Not from the front, and definitely not from the side. Look at that. You can see my infotainment and my gauges, but when you have an outside light source reflecting off of it, it obscures it even more. So the second you have more light on the outside, it starts to turn into a mirror again. If you're looking for the blacked out look, you can achieve it with 20% all around and 20 on the windshield. It's still gonna look like this at night. I would even say that you could achieve this with 5% all around and 30 on the windshield if you wanna go brighter on the windshield and darker on the sides. There's many ways to achieve this look. Going 5% all around with 15 on the windshield is getting to the point where it's getting too excessively dark.